Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. Welcome to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. On our agenda this morning we have apologies, Mandy.
We've received apologies from Councillor Heath.
Thank you. Oh.
We've also got apologies from Councillor Jeremy Oates. He's attending a funeral this morning.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Have we all read the minutes from the last meeting on the 9th of April? Are we all happy to accept those as read? Thank you. Tina's moved it. Do I have a seconder? Bernard, thank you. Sorry. Okay, we now go on to item 4. John, no speaking today, please, unless your light's on. You have been told. We're having one meeting today, not two. Thank you. Right, we now move to item number 4, community strategy. Councillor Wilson, if you'd like to take the stand.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Lovely to see you today. I'm here with Catherine Mann and Peter Barker to present the community strategy to you this morning. So just a reminder of the context. In February 2023, the Cabinet agreed to develop a community strategy to set out what our long-term vision and approach for empowering our communities was to be. We couldn't do that, of course, without listening to our residents and our partners, so we embarked on a very extensive engagement programme between November last year and the end of February this year, and that's set out in paragraphs 4 to 9 of the report. A total of 2,106 residents took part in the survey, and we received 96 responses to the partner survey. A further 236 additional face-to-face conversations provided us with insight, and 83 responses to a survey specifically for young people. The engagement has helped us to understand what residents and partners think and will enable us to shape the strategy with them and not for them. Key themes from the engagement are set out in paragraphs 6 to 12 of the committee report. Much of this validates what we already know, and it supports the need for work that we're already doing. However, a number of themes are partner related, therefore engaging with partners as this work progresses is of course essential. Today we want to test with you the draft vision statement, the pillars and the objectives for the community strategy. So it's rather than deep delving into what's happening in local divisions, this is the pillars and the strategy that we want to focus on. We'll give the overview and the timescales for this work, and then of course we welcome your committee's views, Chairman. The responses received from the engagement and work with our partners have helped us to shape the initial structure of the strategy, including the draft vision statement and the strategic priorities for communities. And the draft vision statement you'll find at paragraph 18 in the report. This strategy and the approach is about making sense to our community, so we need to keep this meaningful and avoid overly corporate language. Paragraph 19 of the report sets out the draft pillars and objectives, as I've mentioned, for the developing strategy, and each of these reflects either a key part of the learning from our community engagement work or an existing priority within our current work with communities and partners already. We've already worked with Corporate Scrutiny in a working group in March around the early thoughts on this strategy. We've also worked with internal staff, external partners, and of course with the Cabinet to take views so it's developed up to this point. The feedback that you give us this morning will shape the content of the main strategy as it's drafted in full through July and August this year, ahead of a Cabinet decision on the strategy in September. And we'll also be engaging further, Chairman, with residents and partners during those months to ensure that the work is as good as it possibly can be to set out the ambitious future for our work with communities and partners. So I'd like to throw this open to your membership, Chairman, and welcome your comments on the statement itself, on the pillars and the objectives, and any questions we hope to be able to answer for you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Has everybody read the recommendations for this report? Yes. Right, okay. Do we have any questions that we'd like to put to Councillor Wilson, Catherine and Peter? Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Makes interesting reading in parts. But when you make reference to partners, who are those partners? Could you just, I mean, I know with community we've seen the scope of it, but is there any significant partners that you would want to focus in on? And I'm putting that around the context of East Staffordshire and Burton, where it's a very diverse community, multinational, multiracial, and their view is very important. Are you reaching out in that context? And how will you work with the parish councils? It says we will work with the parish councils. So what's the mechanism for working with a parish council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peters, for the question. We work very closely with our voluntary community sector partners. We work with other districts and boroughs. Of course, we work with community groups as well. We work extensively throughout our library service as well. I have identified that possibly there is a demographic, maybe more so in East Staffs than anywhere else, where we haven't reached as many people, we haven't managed to engage as many, and that work is ongoing. But I'll hand over to Catherine just to make sure I've not missed anybody out.
Thank you. So this has been very much the start of the work that we're doing with communities and widening that engagement. And what we've done through the engagement to date is made some really good contacts within the districts and the boroughs. We've continued to sort of strengthen the relationship that we've got with parish councils, but we're also very aware that some parts of Staffordshire are not parished, so it's important as well that we work with those organisations. And as you referenced in East Staffordshire, those small groups as partners. We're also working with MPFT, we're also working through the ICB, and making sure that as part of this community strategy that it is reflective of as wide a Staffordshire as possible. We will go back out to communities during July and August to continue to engage with people, because we're very grateful for the feedback that we had as part of our initial consultation, but recognise that it doesn't stop there and that there's more work to do in terms of engaging with and working with those partner organisations.
And Chairman, if I can add, I apologise, I didn't answer the question about parish councils. So we have, as you know, 187 parish councils in this county. We are doing a great deal of work with them through the SPCA, the Staffordshire Parish Councils Association, to provide them with a toolkit so that they have regular updates about what's available to them through the County Council, how we can work with them. That we're very keen not to be seen to be doing things to them, but how we can work with those parish councils that are interested in that collaboration with us. So that is an ongoing piece of work that we'll revisit. And this isn't something that's a short-term idea. This is something that's going to carry on over several years. So we want to build those relationships and build that collaboration with parishes and obviously community groups and the rest of our partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Chair, thank you for that. I think really just following on from Bernard's question about partners. And I think it is essential for this particular agenda and report to succeed. And I note that you talked about communities being at the heart of everything that we do, and early engagement and meaningful engagement is really important. And I do think what the objective of this report is trying to achieve is about corralling and harnessing that huge untapped potential that there is in our local communities. So I do think the objective is the right one. I know I shall sound like a bit of a scratch record now because I've made this point previously. I think when other agencies have attempted this previously, there's quite a lot of peer-reviewed studies that tend to suggest that something called building social capital is the way forward. This report tends to be that sort of build it and they will come approach. I think when it talks about local communities' involvement, I think we need a bit more than that. I think people need some encouragement, some direction around some of that. So I do think it would be useful to see some indication of that. I also think your focus on parish councils is the right one. That, from my experience, that does seem to be where a lot of the focus is around those local groups. And I don't want to I bring this down to local areas, and it is a strategic meeting, of course, but in my area in South Staffs, I only have 2 parish councils, but interestingly, both of them are in the process of writing to our local police to tell them that they don't want any engagement with them. And that is because the local police have taken a decision that they will only engage now every 3 months. Both parish councils feel that that is insufficient. I wrote to the Commissioner, and to be fair to him, he came and spoke to both parish councils, and he shares the concern around that lack of engagement. And I think just going back to what Bernard was saying there about which partners are they fully engaged, I just wonder whether there is more work to be done on our engagement. I'm only using the police as an example. There's probably others. But local communities, crime and disorder is an issue. It is one of those things that people want to get involved with. And other agencies that have used things that sort of the police do, like only from my previous experience, but usually it sort of starts off with Neighbourhood Watch, and then you get a group of people who've self-identified as being able and willing to do something, and then that moves off into other various bits and pieces. And I think it's a well-trodden, well-evidenced path. I do think, though, that there is some need for some urgent work, and certainly with the Commissioner, who expressed views that he shared our concerns around one of the main parties moving away, retreating from that community space, which I find incredible for the police service. But unless we have that buy-in, unless these people are committed, then unfortunately the objective will fail, won't it? So I just a couple of things really. I think it should be more about building social capital. I'd like to see that included somewhere in it. On the whole, I welcome it. I think it is a good report and the objective is right. But unless we get some of that connectivity right, then unfortunately it won't succeed.
Thank you for those comments. And I think one of the key things that came back actually from the survey was about people feeling safe in this county. So I absolutely take on board what you're saying, Bob. Yes, this is a difficult subject to deal with. Social capital is not an easy thing to come by, and it's a long game for us, but it's absolutely something that we're committed to doing. Obviously, what we're looking at today is the strategy and the sort of the pillars of the thing and the foundation of it all, and that's really what we're asking you to sort of comment on and help us with this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Francis.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, there's quite a few things in this. There's quite a lot in it, actually, because under all these objectives are sub-objectives and so on. How long is this strategy going to be in place? What's the lead time on it? What's the definition of it as a lead time? I mean, we've done these strategies before. I mean, I'm old and past it, I am. We've been on this council 15 years, going on 16. So we've done these before, but we need time frames. As for Objective 3, improving our roads, I think that's down to highways as well. So, I mean, okay, we work with our partners like Amy, and developing a local transport plan. Well, unless the government give us money to increase the bus services, that's a dead duck. Borough and district, town, parish, community groups. Well, that's entirely up to the members to work with the parish councils. I've got 9 parish councils on my patch. When the Boundary Commission have altered it and it comes in next year, there's going to be 14. It's too big, there's too many, you can't deal with it. What I did was to set up a Trent Valley collaboration group, which is all 9 parish councils meet every quarter round a table discussing the problems and sorting things out through me as the conduit to this place. For people to feel safe in the community, we need more cops. It's as simple as that. I used to have a meeting every month with the local PCSO and the local police sergeant. That hasn't happened now for 5 years, going on 6 years. And they used to get intelligence from me and other people on the parish council. That's not happening anymore. We used to have a police station at Haywood, which was shut with 3 bobbies in it. The community feel abandoned by the police, I'll tell you that for nothing. Absolutely abandoned by the police. And when I chair the Trans Valley collaboration group, that is what's coming through all the time, particularly in rural areas, because we have loads of crime in rural areas, particularly farms, for getting pinched. And really, the police come and give them a crime number, and that's it. And it's just not good enough. So I welcome this strategy, but there's a lot behind it that needs to be sorted out first. Thanks, Chairman.
Can I just start by saying Councillor Francis is far from old and past it. Okay, so this is a long-term strategy. It's a 5-year strategy, but in between times, because 5 years way too long, isn't it, to leave something. So we will be checking in regularly with residents, probably at the halfway mark, probably 2.5 years in or so. But if more is required, then of course we will do more. I can't answer for police engagement, but again, they are partners of ours, and if that's the emerging thing that's coming out from this, then absolutely those conversations need to be had. The idea of this morning, though, is just to kind of agree that we're not missing anything out, that what we've considered as the pillars and the strategy for this, that we've covered everything. And I think I'm hearing very loudly and clearly that the police is an area that we need to focus on. But is there anything else, and are there any other comments that we need to be mindful of?
Thank you. Have Councillor Pert now.
Thank you. Good morning. Given we're talking about the voluntary sector, I thought I should just start my comments by offering congratulations to Phil Pusey, the Chief Exec of Skivvies, who was recently, as last Saturday, awarded an MBE for his work as the Chief Exec of Staffordshire Council of Voluntary Youth Services, and also to just offer our congratulations to all those other people in our communities who have been recognised in such way. I have one member of the Eccleshall Division's community who has been awarded a BEM medal as well, but obviously I think that would be appropriate just to start that way. Where I really wanted to go to was there is a fundamental problem at the moment, which is where do we find our next generation of volunteers from? Staffordshire has a huge heritage in the numbers of people who volunteer doing all sorts of things. And, you know, that is to the strength of the county and our communities. But I am concerned by what this strategy does looking forwards. Because the danger is we play the strategy based on how we see the voluntary sector and communities looking backwards rather than anticipating where things are going to go to. And I guess that is my primary concern here. Are we being too broad brush in principles that we'd all say that we'd sign up to because they are so broad brush? And what does it really mean for some of those seldom heard voices, some of those sections of our community, particularly those ones that we want to get more engaged in communities? Young people I'm particularly thinking about. At the last corporate review, we talked about the county council's culture and that redefinition of the county council's culture. And I wonder whether actually there are several linkages between that piece of work and this. And equally, we also talked about digital, the County Council's digital strategy, and we recognised that we were certainly a long way from being an innovator. So when you look at Objective 4 of Pillar B and look at digital inclusion, I wonder whether we are the best people to be talking and leading on digital inclusion, because I think there are some better minds than ours. You know, I see these sort of AI videos these days that can take people to be able to speak in 15, 20, 30 different languages. And it isn't just an overdubbing using some technology. It is, you know, they will look at your facial mannerisms and they will literally put together a video which will do that. And the reason I make that point is, you know, Bernard talking about engagement with, you know, all the range of languages and communities within his area. You know, how are we actually going to make this alive, or are we just going to play it in the same rules that we've always played it? And that is my concern here, because if we do that, we'll get the same results. And I think we need some slightly different results because of this issue about volunteers coming forwards. And I wonder where, you know, technology and media come to play in delivering some of this. And just as my final sort of comment on this element, I just wanted to pick up, and I don't want to wordsmith things because we'll be here all day, but under Pillar A, Objective 4, wanting to understand communities, I would just encourage you to understand and do something with that understanding. So I think there's an action verb that is missing after understand. Understand and engage, understand and offer solutions. You know, I think there has to be something more than just understanding, because frankly, I don't want someone to understand and just be a passive bystander. I want someone to really engage with me. I think it's a good report. I think it's a good place to start. But I would just encourage stretching that and saying how much further can we go? Because I think COVID proved one thing, that when you ask communities to come forward with a common aim, they will do so. And I think if you have that ambition and that vision, people will come forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I would like to just pay tribute, actually, just while I've got the opportunity to thank the thousands of volunteers that we do have in this county. Just to give you a few numbers, the Libraries and Arts Service within this county has 528 volunteers just at the moment, and some of them help to run the 27 community managed libraries. We've got 89 volunteers who work within our Staffordshire Archives and Heritage Service. And we also have a team of volunteers working in our countryside estate as well, with 50 active volunteers working in the 8 county family hubs. So, you know, let's not underestimate the power that these volunteer groups and these individuals have. So I'd like to pay tribute to those people, but I absolutely accept what Councillor Pert is saying, that we need to, of course, engage with our younger demographic as well. And I think I mentioned earlier that we had managed to engage with 83 young people who responded to this survey, which is, it's not the best, but it's not that bad actually. It's pretty good. But I think more needs to be done, and I agree with the digital side of things as well, and I will be taking that back. I don't know if did you want to come in, or are you okay? I think that's as good as it gets with Jeremy Pert. Thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Really, just following on from Councillor Pert's point in some respects. I mean, point 11, where it says that people identify mostly with place, and I think you know life's always been changed with migration and one thing or another, internal migration within the country. But I think now the push towards all school children, as soon as they get to a certain age, going to university and leaving home, that actually breaks that sort of connectivity with place. And I think in some respects what you get with volunteers, you get older, early retired volunteers, or people who've got more, you know, money who can afford to sort of have that little bit of extra space in their life to volunteer, and very young children, so to speak. If we do a tree planting exercise, it's little ones and grey-haired ones, and one or two who can use a shovel in between, so to speak. And it's what concerns me about the community is the breaks which we have in the community. I mean, especially in some of the rural areas. I mean, I represent a district, as Councillor Worthington does, which incorporates a lot of the Peak District and a lot of places where people want second homes and leisure and whatever. And it's very difficult for young people to come back, even if they want to come back. It's very difficult for people to come back if they want to set up their own business because of internet connections in some parts of the area, including close urban areas. If I'm looking at, I always lose a signal at Rushton Spencer, for example. But yeah. So it's making sure that we've got the infrastructure which supports these things which we are trying to do to maintain and strengthen that community. What we don't want to get to a situation because of a lack of housing, for example, that we like parts of North Wales, which are effectively, you know, a very beautiful holiday camp of old cottages, so to speak, and that is a fear, and then that brings in potential for social isolation because the people who are left are in little pockets. So we've got to try and bring all that together. Certainly, I've got no, which brings me on to another point. Certainly, I've got no complaints with the draft pillars and objectives because they're right, but they're broad enough to be able to put an interpretation under there to how it fits, and you can evolve that to suit. A concern I have, and again it was touched on by another speaker, is when you come to transport and highways and things, that's another department. But it isn't another department really, because all these departments dovetail in and sort of merge. They're not boxes, you know, which you can isolate and put into silos, and we need to break, and we want to break those silos down. The things which concern me about transport and the local plan, so to speak, is that I think we've got to move away. I think we've got to have an overarching Staffordshire strategy, but we've got to look at the local transport needs and break that down into areas. Certainly the needs in the northwest of Staffordshire are far different than the needs in South Staffordshire and Lichfield and Tamworth. You would never sort of say, let's have a collective strategy and look to get a bus service which runs from Kidsgrove to Tamworth, so to speak, would you? It might be used by the odd person on a day trip. The other thing which always sort of tickles me is the thing about working with our boroughs, districts, towns and parishes. There's too many times where it's been top down. Oh no, this is what we can do, this is what we can offer. The conversation should be with the towns and districts to say, you know, ideally what do you want? Let's use that as a starting point and see how we can work together to achieve something. There's been so many frustrations that, oh no, the county won't do that. In instances, the district won't do that. But the reality of it is that we're all in this together and there's that commonality. So that objectives 3 and 4 are very, very important. And the other thing about highways and linking it into community, the one thing which has suffered over the last number of years is the repair and maintenance of pavements. And I've got people who are effectively trapped in their houses because they've got, they're slightly infirm and got disabilities, because they can't access the pavements to get even the closest places where they want to go. So I think we need to be looking at that holistically. You know, if we want transport to work, we need to get that sorted out and fitted in. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so I can move mountains. I can do all sorts of things. I can't fix the housing crisis. I can't fix public transport, but it is something that this county council is extremely aware of, and there are other people that are working on that. I think the thing about communities is that it overlaps onto so many other subjects, and so I could end up going down a wormhole and doing other people's stuff for them. But I'm going to focus on the community side of things, and I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Yates, that this is definitely not a top-down thing. This is definitely not we're doing it to you. We want to work with them. And, there are certain areas that don't want us to work with them, and they're very happy doing what they're doing on their own, thank you very much. And we have to respect those different areas and different opinions. But I absolutely take on board what you're saying. And as a county council, we are looking at all of those transport things and looking at housing. Obviously, that's more of a district and borough matter. But they are our partners, and we work closely with them. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. Just a couple of things, really. There's a lot of lovely words in here and a lot of lovely objectives in here. Some are doable and some aren't, and obviously there's a lot of meat got to go on the bones underneath all of these objectives. What we mustn't do, I think, is sort of have this plan and forget that there's people out there that won't know about all of this. For instance, you mentioned one of the partners of the Parish Councils Association. All parish councils are not members of the association, as you're probably aware of that. So how do they get informed of what goes on? That they have their own reasons for not being part of that group. That's one question. There's a lot of volunteers out there that sort of don't belong to anything, if you know where I'm coming from. So we mustn't miss those. And at the same time, as an authority, we don't need to be coming, this is just heavy-handed is what I'm trying to say, to make it too difficult for them to actually go about what they like to do in their communities. I know this is more about the lower down bits rather than the objectives, but it is there and needs to be thought about. You talked about digital, and digital is absolutely great and it's the future. We all accept that. But digital can also be a detriment to communities as well as being a positive. Sorry, it is, as far as I'm concerned, because you only need one person to put one thing on a digital platform, and before you know where you are, what they're talking about becomes negative. So I don't know how we'll get over that, but I'm just sort of, this is the sort of thing that you see out there in the communities. It only takes one person to put something that's negative, and before you know where you are, you're flooded with all negative responses to what somebody is doing in the community. So I don't know how you capture that in there. Whether you can capture it in there, to be quite honest with you. But I just thought I'd mention it because that's what we're talking about, communities. And I think it's important we get a grasp of everything in here, because as I said, there's a lot of lovely sentences and words, and there's obviously a lot of work got to go underneath all of these objectives. But it'd be interesting to see what the next stage is of your strategy, if you know where I'm coming from. So that it doesn't just sit there on a shelf. We talked about roads and highways and transport. Those sit alongside, and the public out there, if they read this strategy, they'd say, why don't the council get on with what they're supposed to be doing instead of coming up with this strategy? Because it all fits into the same thing. It's about the community as a whole. So I don't know whether there's any questions in there or you can answer any questions, but I just thought I needed to make my point on a few issues that I've read within there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry, and I take on board what you're saying. And one of the things I often say is that not all parishes are affiliated with the SPCA, and not all areas of the county are parished. And so we are very mindful that where there are those gaps, that we do build those relationships with the local groups. And even if a parish council isn't affiliated to the SPCA, we're not going to turn our backs on them. So those conversations will continue. But I know Pete wants to come in at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add on that, really, as Councillor Wilson said, we do know that not everyone is in the SPCA, and we also know that not everyone is parished at all. So we will do everything we can to reach every area. So we will do stuff through the SPCA this summer to ask them to put messages out for us. But we will also reach out to all of our parish and town councils to say this work is taking place and to say this is very much the start. And I think that's something that's been a theme of this morning's conversations, is that this work is the start of our community strategy. This will be something that's iterative, it develops over time, it's something that we continue to test with residents and partners, something that builds further. So this is the starting point and is a point that we can kind of develop further from. So as you've seen, the draft kind of objectives and pillars that are here are broad at this stage, and the action planning and the kind of delivery of all of that will fit underneath them all and will be in much more detail in terms of what we will actually practically do. But as a starting point, these things have been kind of tested internally and externally and started to shape. But we are very aware that as we reach out to partners on this further this summer and to communities, we need to do everything we can to reach into every corner and every part of Staffordshire, because if we just take a blanket approach of just attempting to use one organisation for that, we know we won't get to everybody that we should.
Correct.
Councillor Francis, can I ask you to refrain from commenting while others are speaking, please? You are interrupting the meeting. No, I know that, but other people are speaking, so if you don't mind. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just ask Councillor Wilson if you could expand on the 83 young people. What do we consider to be a young person within the council? Because young to me is potentially different to Councillor Perry. No, it is, or yourself. Our views are different on what's considered a young person. I instantly think of a 10-year-old child, but that might not be who's completed that survey, so I'd be interested to know what we as a council put that as a demographic. And you've also mentioned with regards to parish councils, the ward that I look after, as you've mentioned, doesn't have a parish council. It doesn't have a library, and it has an ageing population, making it more difficult potentially for them to access the public transport to get out further into the community. I want to know how we are tackling those areas to get them to engage. We had 2,100 thereabouts people that responded, and I'm just really keen to see how that's split out across the whole of our county. We've got rural, city, town. I'd just like some more information on that if we can, please.
If I can say, I don't think anyone in this room is old. I think we're all young, aren't we? At heart, at least. So when we say young people, and I need to get this confirmed, but as far as I understand, it's under 24s. Now, as you know, we have a fantastic network of libraries here in this county, and that's visited by people of all ages, children, parents and sort of older people, retired people as well. So our libraries do a massive amount of work. It unfortunately goes somewhat under the radar, but a lot of the library service, that's our front door to this county council. So people visit the library and they see the staff and the teams in there and the volunteers in there as well. And that's one way of sharing with people that come in. We do our very best to reach absolutely everybody. We can't always guarantee that everybody will engage. The benchmark that we wanted to achieve was 2,000 in terms of people that engaged with this particular survey that we did, and we did exceed that. It's not always going to be particularly easy to engage with absolutely everybody, but I definitely take on board the comments of Councillor Hayden in that, you know, we need to reach all of those groups in all of the county. We want them to engage with us. So as Councillor Francis has been mentioning in the corner there, it is very much a case of we've got 62 members in this council. You know, we should be asking those to engage more with those groups and feed back to us on that. So, you know, very happy to take that assistance from our 62 members.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Spencer wants to have the final word.
It's very rare I get the final word, but there you go.
Don't you believe it?
I do think the report is welcome. I also think, you know, we've all sat here and talked about those difficulties that we will have, and if those difficulties didn't exist, we'd already have it, wouldn't we? It would already be in place. And I think the temptation to talk about the hurdles and everything else, and I think I was the first to jump on that bandwagon as it trundled past, is completely understandable. I do think, though, that we shouldn't forget, and echoing something that Peter said about this is the start, this is where we are to start off with, we should recognise the immense amount of work that's been done to put this on the table as it is. And I also think the fact that we've spoken and engaged with so many people, and an interesting point is that the objective of this meeting this morning is to see if we've got the pillars right and everything else. And actually no one has suggested anything other than what's there. So I do think we should finish with that. I think it's hugely encouraging that we've spoken to those people, we've engaged. The conclusions that we've come to, whilst we all agree that there will be some difficulties in how we move that forward, but I think that that is clear evidence that the work has been well worthwhile. It's come to the right conclusions, and I would echo what Peter said about it as the start of a process. And from my perspective and my communities, I very much welcome the direction it's going in, and also just to say thanks for all the work of pulling this together. I'm not sure a lot of other local authorities are going into this level of detail in supporting their communities, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spencer. And I think, yes, you're quite right. The first thing we wanted to do was to really focus on what the low-hanging fruit is, and get that underway. As you say, you know, there's nothing's perfect, and there are always going to be obstacles and hurdles, aren't there? But yeah, this is just the very start, and we're very, very excited about it. So we're really glad of the positive feedback from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Bob summed it up quite nicely, so I won't repeat him. But just to say thank you to yourselves and your team for coming, and all the hard work on the report that you've done for us. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny meeting. I'll open the floor to yourself if you want to continue with your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is our quarterly performance report. It's the new format of the performance report. Councillor Parry's joined me today and we'll talk you through the details of that. Mrs Bissell is here as support, as is Mr Tradewell, for any questions that we might have in detail. I suppose I'll kick off and then hand over to Ian about the some of the financial details. I hope you like the new format of the report, but there are some challenges that we're facing. We've got rising costs and levels of demand which remain a challenge. We have a £4 million overspend at the end of quarter 4, which is 0.58% of the annual budget of the council, which compares favourably with our final position in quarter 3, which was at 5.4 million or 0.9%. Page 22 of the report goes through the highlights and the challenges we face. I don't intend to talk to those in any detail. And then we go in some more detail as you go through the document dealing with health and care, children and young people, economy, highways, climate change, how we work. Madam Chairman, I'm happy to talk to any of the details, but I'd just like to hand over to Councillor Parry just to talk through his component of the report.
Good morning, Chair, and morning, members of the committee. This is the quarter 4 outturn. We'll be reporting tomorrow as Cabinet the final outturn for the year, which shows a slight improvement overall on the quarter 3. By the time we've done the wash-up, the improvement is marginal, but it's an improvement. We would think that that kind of level of overspend for a council of our size and a budget of our size is not necessarily significant. It's within what you would expect, you know, sort of plus or minus. What is interesting, I think, is the underlying issues within the budget. The pressures we know are in children's services. And we did kind of bake that into the budget, that we knew, in a sense, that we were going to have to invest some additional funds into the transition of children's services. And that's turned out to be in the, you know, in the neighbourhood of £11 million. Why didn't we put that into the budget in the first place? Well, it's because I think we had ambitions to see that downturn, which has always been projected in the MTFS, that downturn of savings as the transformation embedded. It's taken longer, and often these things do. It's taken longer than we expected, and so that overspend is the thing which has tipped the council's budget into that 4 million zone of year-end overspend. Elsewhere, though, in the budget, if you look down the kind of outturn throughout the rest of the council's finances, they're either all balanced or slightly underspent. And I think that is a commendable result to our officers and to my cabinet colleagues who have managed rigorously the budgets that have been assigned to various parts of the council and to those budget holders who are responsible for that. So to see the budget, you know, except for one area that we knew about and we'd planned for and we'd resourced, actually coming in under budget or on budget is, I think, a real result, and something you would have to go some way to see replicated elsewhere in the local government sector. Notwithstanding that, we know that we've still got those pressures to address, and they are in children's, and not just in children's number of children in care, but around SEND, around SEND transport. News item this morning about £1 billion worth of cost pressure on SEND across the local government sector. There is, as you all know, the statutory override on some of that, which means that it's kind of off balance sheet, as it were. But nevertheless, it's there as a liability and a risk that we're aware of, but we are sharing that, I think, across the local government sector, and indeed have some top cover from ministers to allow us to run with that. Thank you, Chair.
I think you're going to say about the format, aren't you?
Yes, I got myself overexcited. It's the old. This is the last of the old format. next time around you get the new format.
It just looks like the new format.
Yeah, well, so forgive me, I was inaccurate with that. I just wanted to refer to some of the points that have been made that last time we were here, just so that we're clear that we've been following up in detail the points that were raised last time. You'd asked for data for a longer time period, over 2 to 3 years, to see annual trends, particularly in EHCP and Category 3 highway repairs. I think, Councillor Pert, you asked for that. We sent a response on the 14th of March with a further update on the 10th of June with amendments to feature in the next Q4 report, which you've got in front of you here. We then were also asked for the following information: criteria for home upgrade funding for off-grid mains gas supply properties, and if this is related to postcodes. The following response, we sent a response and supporting documentation with the public health team was sent to MADS on the 14th of March. You wanted to know about the business startup rates with a link to the monthly survey. This was completed again on the 14th of March. And then you asked for a plan to improve the quality of care providers as rated by CQC. Again, the response was sent by the public health team and others on the 14th of March. So we followed up quickly after the previous meeting with the information that you had requested. I hope, Madam Chairman, that meets to the satisfaction of the committee. I've got to thank Mrs Bissell for her support on that. It's down to her that the stuff gets sent, not me.
Thank you. I think, Lindsay, you're going to explain the new format now. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yes, so this is the last quarter, Q4 of the previous format, and that's because it's the kind of closing of what was previously the 23-24 corporate delivery plan. So as you're all aware, the new corporate delivery plan was signed off, and the next quarter's reporting will predominantly focus on that. We have briefed the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week, just so that the Chair's aware of the new changes to come. I think, given some of the feedback that we've had at previous Overview and Scrutiny Committees regarding members wanting to see more data, I think when you see the report come through, which is due here on the 30th of July, hopefully you'll feel that we've hit the brief on that. Just from a data perspective, as you'd expect with me, you used to be able to see in this report around 23, 24 different data sources. The new report, you'll be seeing around 57. So there is a lot of data there, and I think my ask from members today is that might mean that it is a bit more lengthy, but one of the things that we've tried to do, again from feedback from this committee, one of the feedback in the past has been that the data's been a little buried sometimes within the appendices. The new format is going to be bringing that right to the forefront for members to be able to see pretty sharply and hopefully a bit more snappier. So that'll be due to come on the 30th of July, and we've already briefed the Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Worthington.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think it's an excellent report. I think when you think from Q1, we got a 9.5 million overspend and now it's down to 4 million. It's really something to be thankful for. I'm aware, as obviously Chair of Audit, we know the problems with send and send transport. It's something that's really out of our control. I don't know quite how we can actually get to grips with that, because it's a big expense for us and it keeps going up and up and up with the number of people asking for the education reviews. It's getting quite worrying. So, but anyway, well done, Ian and the team. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 49, bullet point, well, paragraph 86. Costs increased significantly in 22-23 as a result of rising cost of inflation, despite further increase in the budget. It's likely that further overspend of 3.2 million will arise this year. That is a lot of money, that is. And I wonder how we're going to cover that, Ian. And I mean, Mike's just mentioned the transport, which we know is a massive amount of money, and we need to do something about the send transport, definitely. It is a big lump out of the budget that we've got to tackle in some way or other. and I'm heavily involved in what's going on at school with that. On the back of that is private schools that are offering SEND education. And I'm talking about Horizon now down at Ruisley. We're now at overcapacity in Marshlands. We've got 175 children on roll come September, and we could end up with 200. And we're trying to take local children from our area, so we ain't importing them via the transport system. I've been adamant about that. We've got to cut down on the transportation. But the thing is, if we can't take them, the answer to some of this is to send them to Horizon. Now, I hope you've looked at that budget that's costing us a fortune to send them to Horizon, because some of them are costing £80,000 a year if you send them to Horizon. So I'd like you to have a look at that and tell me exactly what we're doing about that. The other thing is on page 50, demand for SEND transport, we've got all that. Implemented a new education banding tool for assessing a child's EHCP. Well, we know we've had problems with the EHCPs in the past, and it was a big initiation that we've put into practice to sort that out. And I think you've done a great job on sorting that out, to be quite frank. I think we well put together with that. But when I look at the high needs block, page 1591, disappeared. It's forecast to overspend by 21 million. That's the whole needs block, isn't it, apart from breaking it down a little. That's a hell of a lot of money, that is. How are we covering that here?
I'll let Ian talk to the finances. But just in terms of the SEND transport, it's been you know better than most other councillors what a challenge that SEND transport has been. So we've looked at ways of making more efficient routes, and we've employed a company called Q Routes, and Q Routes has got this algorithm which allows you to determine where children need to be picked up. Bus routes and taxi routes are quite a complicated thing, and getting the most efficient route available is something that saves a lot of money. That's the first thing. And also allows the possibility of people sharing taxi rides. So Q Routes has been implemented. There'll be some time, I think, before we actually see the full impact of that. I think in some instances, if I'm just sort of thinking aloud, and I know it's dangerous to think aloud at a committee like this, I do think some parents need to get used to the idea that their children might need to share a lift, because some aren't sharing lifts. And actually, there's no reason why they shouldn't share a lift. If you actually think about how many children get to school by sharing a bus, I think actually sometimes the idea that we've got to share transport is something that we get used to, and that's preparing you for adulthood. So I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that people might be able to share a taxi. As far as the Horizon thing is concerned, I saw Lindsay noting down furiously. I can't give you an answer to that right now. Councillor Francis, but I can get back to you with an answer in due course. I'll hand over to Ian just to talk to the finances on the high need.
The SEND budget is something that is outside in the sense of county council's control. That sits on our balance sheet, as it were, as that overspend, but it doesn't form necessarily part of our revenue budget. But I'm looking for financial support on that. John, do you want to?
Yeah, as it says in the report, there is something called a statutory override in place, which basically says, Director of Finance, you don't have to worry about this deficit until the end of the financial year ending in April 2026. So in the short term, it's not a massive worry. I think the problem is it's growing, and it's growing fast. So whilst it might be around 20 odd million now, in a few years' time, it'll be much higher than that. So we are quite worried about what happens when the statutory override ends. We're in a better position than an awful lot of other authorities around the country who are also really keen to find out what happens when the statutory override ends. So that is something we really have to sort of get an answer to. But the reality is the local authorities around the country are not able to take that pressure when the statutory override comes to an end, and the government's going to need to find another solution for that.
Just picking up on the point around the work that's being done on send transport and the overall the rising cost, I think that's something that we're very much on. There is a recovery plan in place. The queue routes that the leader mentioned is an important part of that. I think the biggest part of it is to try and ensure that more children with SEND are educated in mainstream schools. The more that we can do that, the better it is from a financial cost position, including around the transport side of that. And if Tim Moss were here, I'm sure he'd have the figures at his fingertips, but we can show there is some success in getting more children now into, to remain in mainstream settings, which we think is in their best interest, because once they reach 18, they will be in mainstream settings for the rest of their lives. The challenge is that whilst we're having some success at that, the rising number of children presenting for an education, health and care plan continues to rise. And again, it does feel that at some point the government may need to think about solutions to that.
Yes, you can do.
Thanks for that. That's good. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ian. Totally agree with everything you said, but the thing about it is, as far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of SEND kids who cannot cope with having a shared lift, if you like, because they've got severe autism, for example. So they can't do it because they have to be kept in a quiet environment, if you like. That's number one. As far as the children go, if we want to put them in mainstream schools, which I agree with, I totally agree with, because a lot of children in special educational needs group can be accommodated in mainstream schools, and that's exactly what we should be doing, because they need to get that social interaction. The caveat to that is, as I've banged on before many times in this council for year after year after year, if you've not got the provision in the mainstream school to look after them properly, and you haven't got a good SENCO, Special Education Needs Coordinator, you're doomed before you start. And I've found a school with the head from Marslands, who we've taken another child in from a mainstream school 2 weeks ago, who couldn't cope with it because the support wasn't good enough in the school. So there's all these factors come into play, and I appreciate what you say, John. Ian's got a hell of a job on, because it's an exponential rise, isn't it, all the time? It's every month that goes past, so thanks for that. But just to appreciate that there's more to the fish and chips than just fish and a chip and a carton of peas.
If you can help me with that analogy, Madam Chairman, I'll be very grateful.
You've got salt and vinegar as well. Okay, thank you. Councillor Yates.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And for the second time this morning, I find myself agreeing wholeheartedly with Councillor Francis, because I'll even, I'm thinking you're coming away from the dark side, are you? I don't know. I'm focused on page 49 as well, is the first one which I put, which really highlights the issues with the overall budget and whatever. And I agree. I mean, I've made a comment here before you actually said that sharing needs to be appropriate to the need, because some can, some can't. That's always been the case, and that becomes important. I think one of the things which, was a carryover from the medium-term financial plan working group was that we identified this as the critical area to achieving budget. And I know there was a lot of work, and we had a lot of discussions on that, which Councillor Thompson, the chair, was part of that. And there wasn't really a plan B. We sort of questioned on what were the alternatives if it didn't work. So, it needs to work, but it needs to work right. It needs to work right with the pupils being at the forefront of what's necessary, so to speak. And just moving on to something which is obviously related, and I'll come on to my final point. I did scribble something down. I arrived early this morning to scribble something down because it was playing on my mind. And I'm just going to say this. I'm aware that this committee ostensibly looks at the financial performance of the council. However, last night's Panorama programme highlighted the very real need to apply far greater scrutiny to the setting up and management of alternative private educational provision within the SEND sector. aside from the standard offset regulations, which you can actually drive a bus through in terms of their registration, can I ask what safeguards the county council puts in place to ensure the most rigid quality assurances are carried out on all providers within the county and outside for where we send our some of our pupils outside of the county area. And I think that is the very important point, which leads on to the next point. One way of resolving, the obvious way of resolving the additional spend on private sector where we're short of capacity, the obvious way of reducing spend on send transport is to create more provision. I live in an area, which I'll try not to mention today, I live in an area which lost a special educational needs school. And as a consequence, we're dependent on high cost transport and the disruption to the school day and the family life that transport brings. And I'm just wondering, you know, having spoken to academies and their SEND provision, it's sometimes difficult to have the same control over academies to create space, not just space within classrooms, so the shared classrooms, but cohabitation on a site where you've got specialists when you need specialists and migration to shared classrooms where you don't, and a hybrid between the two. And really putting that together, the control and the assurance on the private sector, as exemplified yesterday, that there could be, you know, issues, and how close are we looking at that, and the control of not just transport provision from a point of view of sharing, but from a point of view of where we have to travel and the distances, and are there something we can do locally, leaning on our school, our county control schools or the academies to actually do that. I mean, it's an evolving picture. It's a very, very difficult picture. I think the statutory override is potentially frightening. That's got to be addressed by whichever government comes into power this next time, and hopefully it's addressed in the proper format. I know this county is not as bad as some, and I've heard horror stories around the country on where they are. So that has got to be a priority for ingoing governments. But I think, you know, overall, we're supportive of the work being done, but it's definitely got to be emphasis on the pupil-based first approach, which it can be.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm acutely aware of the fact that occasionally Councillor Yates threatens me with his final point, which he claimed that one was, only to come back later with more points. So I'll take it with a slight pinch of salt, I think. We've talked about the SEND transport budget and the statutory override. I think my concern is the statutory override doesn't relate to what my colleague to my right would say is wooden dollars. It's real money. It's real money we have to spend. And some local authorities are in a position where their statutory override is so high, they're on the verge of having to borrow money in order to fund day-to-day activities. So that's when the thing starts to get really wacky. We're a very long way away from that, but even so, it is real money, and we need to bear that in mind. You're talking about the regulation of private providers. My understanding is that responsibility sits with Ofsted. The County Council, to my knowledge, doesn't have a direct role at all. Of course, we would want to be making sure that if we heard anything back from people who are dissatisfied with the provision of a school, then we will be reporting that to Ofsted. But as you know, since the academisation programme, our schools department has shrunk accordingly, and therefore we rely on the gradings of Ofsted to make sure that the standards are high enough. You talked about the obvious way of making provision available. Unfortunately, in this sector, the word obvious doesn't apply, I'm afraid. So if we were to create a load of special school places in Staffordshire, the way the regulations currently sit is that somebody from outside Staffordshire could say, you know what, I really fancy... let's imagine Councillor Francis's school expands by double. And you'd think, well, that's a really good idea, because that could provide for Staffordshire kids who need it. Again, doubled. All right, just let me roll with it, John. Heaven's sake. God, he keeps interrupting. Then, as Chair of Governors, he's not able to say, well, there's a child from outside Staffordshire, therefore you can't come in because we've got places available. And the transport to get the child from, say, Derbyshire into Staffordshire to the place where John is, Councillor Francis is Chair of Governors, we would have to cover the cost of that. So there needs to be changes to the overall regulations that are outside our control before what you state is obvious could actually come to pass. So there are things that central government needs to tweak in order to allow us to become sustainable, and maybe a future government might consider doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Pert.
Thank you, and good morning. I do like the quality of the data that's in these reports, because for those of us who are nerdy enough to look at triangulating across, it's helpful. I do accept that there is a danger with providing more and more data, which is it allows more of us to ask a whole range of other questions. But hopefully there are other people within the organisation who are focusing on recovery in some of those areas. So just looking at page 34, and this may be an own goal because I can feel this coming back into my committee, but hopefully we don't get there. Just slightly concerned by the supported living brokerage. It's taken a fairly rapid nosedive due to the complexity of cases and the volume of cases being looked after. But one of the things with us becoming more reliant on the private rented sector is the private rented sector are also trying to optimise their business models in the main. And you find a lot of landlords are selling up at this moment in time thanks to some of the regulation coming in from government. So I wonder whether that's a sustainable position, or do we think this is a short-term problem? Equally, on the same page, I was slightly concerned by the number of care homes that were rated good or outstanding within Staffordshire, because that's been a long-term aspiration to drive it up to not only the national benchmark, but also to exceed the national benchmark, and it seems to be the right thing to do for some of our most vulnerable residents. On page 36, I've talked a number of times about the percentage of EHCP plans that are done on time, and I would have thought that this is a capacity issue thing, and that at some stage we have enough bodies to be able to look at the capacity that's coming through the system, because that trend is still downwards by the look of it, and it's still only achieving 26%, which is a long way shy of the national average, and I wonder whether there's something we shouldn't be doing on that. And the final point I just wanted to pick up, a note on the original summary of performance. There was a comment relating to allocation of school places. And that's fine, 91% got their first choice and 99 from memory were in the top three. But I did want to pick up the point about whether schools have enough capacity to take in-year pupils who are moving. I know of a number of cases where pupils are having to be homeschooled because there isn't enough capacity in year in schools. And I would just like some assurance that schools are planning for that, because to only move school or only move an area, maybe it's job related, at allocation period time does seem to be a bit restrictive.
Thank you. I'll deal with the last point first. I don't know the answer to the question about children moving from one location to another and whether or not they're having to be homeschooled. That sounds worrying if that's the case, because there's an obligation for a child to be educated under the age of 18, and for a school to say, no, we've got no spaces available, you're going to have to home educate for me, doesn't feel right. As far as capacity is concerned, we are currently doing an exercise looking at capacity across Staffordshire for additional children coming in. If there is a change in government policy concerning VAT on private education, I want to be sure that Staffordshire has enough capacity to deal with any children that are coming from the private sector into the state sector on the back of that change in any potential change that might happen in VAT. I don't have any numbers yet, but we do need to make sure that we've got a little bit of spare capacity to absorb that if necessary. The care homes rating point and the supported living point, I would be probably asking the chair of the Healthy Scrutiny Committee to take a look at that, because there's really important points and perhaps would warrant some further investigation. I think that's probably the best I can say to that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Come back. Thank you for the first response. I'm not sure about the second, but maybe we'll have to see what the committee feel on health. Did you come back to me on the HCPs, please? It's very low against national average, and the trend is still downwards. Is it a capacity issue that we can try and resolve? Because clearly for the last 3-4 years, it's been exactly the same.
Thank you. Members of the committee will recall that we'd flagged up the capacity issue in EHCPs, and we determined that the number of educational, I'm looking across, the number of educational psychologists that we needed was insufficient to the task. So we allocated an additional sum of money, I can't remember precisely what that was, to recruit 10 additional educational psychologists. I think we got 7. 7, yes, people are saying yes, we got 7 out of 10. So we still don't have sufficient numbers. That trend line you see, because it was actually the response I got for the committee here, if I annotated them because Councillor Pert asked, it would appear on every single one of those. So you'll see the data tracks back as you requested further. So you'll see that the downward trend has started to level off from October 22. I think that's broadly where it coincided with the allocation of additional funding. I know that when we did put that additional funding, we got 5 new educational psychologists very quickly, but the recruitment of the remainder is taking some time. So that's as best as I can give you at the moment, but I've noticed Mrs. Bissell's writing down frantically, so we'll be able to get you a more detailed answer in due course to that. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you for that. Just on that last point as well, I heard at the last safeguarding meeting, which has recently been rebranded as Safeguarding Education and SEND, there was a discussion around EHCPs, and I'm told we use something EHCNA. I'm not 100% sure what that all stands for, but it was quite an encouraging report around how Staffordshire is responding to the request for EHCPs. And all of this, whilst the objective is not to reduce them, the likelihood is that they will be reduced because of that early intervention. And there were some very encouraging stats that we saw at that particular meeting. So hopefully that will move in the right direction. Just on the report itself, I do think that we shouldn't overlook the fact that we have a balanced budget, certainly in this current climate, and I agree, I think that should be commended, certainly when we compare to other local authorities. Recently, as I've just said, we had the change in my committee, and we had some inputs around SEND and education and transport, and not to underestimate them, they are quite significant. We shouldn't also forget the fact that we've just had a Ofsted inspection of children's services. What I found quite encouraging is the plan to address that was presented at the last meeting. Whilst it's not perfect, and I think that there are a lot of concerns and issues around how we move forward with it, one of the surprising things for me was it wasn't accompanied by the usual eye-watering bill that comes with usually comes with children's services, and a general recognition that a lot of the improvements can be made internally. My question was purely going to be around how we plan for these budgets and the challenges around children's services as we move forward, but it's been amply covered in previous questions, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. I'm glad you've raised the Ofsted inspection. The Children's Improvement Board has been reformed, and it's chaired by a gentleman called Julian Worcester, and he's doing an excellent job of identifying some of the areas where improvement is needed by us and our partners in the delivery of children's services. I think I've been to every single one of the new children's improvement boards to see exactly how they operate and to demonstrate the fact that I, as leader of the council, are particularly interested in this because the children we look after are profoundly important to us, that we give them the best opportunity we possibly can. I think one of the things that I've observed is that the communication between the various agencies in the delivery of children's services needed to improve. And the Children's Improvement Board has certainly made big strides towards improving that, that communication. And also, I think, improving the identification of the person who takes responsibility for leading something. So when you're having a case conference, sometimes you'll find that certain members of the people who are part of the case conference turn up without reports prepared, or they don't turn up. And so who's responsible for convening it? Who's responsible for making sure the reports are written so we can deal effectively and in a timely way with the children that are presented at those case conferences? Because delays for a child, isn't it interesting if you've got children who are, say, under 10, or you're in close proximity to children who are under 10, if you say to them, Christmas is 2 months away, you may as well say Christmas is in 15 years' time for them. Think about that if you're a child in the children's services where they're waiting for 2 years to have stuff sorted out, or even longer in certain circumstances. We need to get more efficient at it, and I think this is one of the areas where I'm seeing a great deal of improvement. And at the moment, with Neelam having left, Pat Flaherty is now the Director of Children's Services, holds the statutory responsibility until the 4th of July, and then Bernie Brown, who I'm sure will make herself known to you, will take over as the DCS on that date. She's previously from Bolton, Liverpool and Shropshire, so got a great deal of experience in that sector. You talked about EHCPs and early intervention. We've gone into this in some detail, and some of the causes for some of the higher cost packages, or even lower cost packages for that matter. Working with schools to make sure that some children don't need to progress on in their assessments is a really, really helpful thing to do. But it does relate to Councillor Francis's point, is that you need good SENCOs who are confident in their role within each of the school settings in order to help children early, rather than allow the thing to grow and become a bigger problem than it was to start off with. But it's related to your point earlier, which is that the importance of having good SENCOs shouldn't be underestimated.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Yates wants to come back in, but he has been told a very, very small one. I will just cut him off if he goes on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciated you indulging me. I really didn't want to mix up the SEND with anything else because it's such an important subject, and I knew that other people wanted to speak on that, and I didn't want anything definitely. What I just wanted to come on very, very briefly was to do with the Fix More Roads, Improve Transport one, which is always a bugbear. One of the things which concerns me, I noticed the performance is amber and the spend is green, which it can be, because at the end of the day, if you've got a budget to spend, unless it's an emergency, you can rein back on things, and there's certainly evidence that that's been happening. But one thing which concerns me, and I don't think highways have got a grab to it, and I keep mentioning the word adaptation, is how we deal with water. I mean, Section 24 specifically says very wet winter. That's going to carry on happening. There's evidence certainly in the upland areas that the water table has moved, and I've got quite a number of potholes, and I'm sure Councillor Worthington has as well, which have been repaired 2, 3, 4 times in the same year with just a quick patch. And when you see them, they are wet and sodden. Nothing to do with United Utilities, nothing to do with Severn's Rent. It's to do with the change in the water table and the fact that we need really to have a strategy to save money, to take the water away with the drainage before we actually do the repair. Otherwise, we continually repair in the same place. And I've got plenty of examples. It's not an anecdotal comment, but I think that is one of the moves which we've really got to start considering.
We've put extra into the budget on top of when we started this year. Just in the last couple of weeks, another 5 million quid has gone into the budget for that, and some of that's going to be around drainage and targeting those areas and ensuring that we do drill downs or dig downs when necessary to make sure that gullies are flowing. Part of the problem is, as you rightly say, the water table has risen apparently at the highest level for 100 and odd years in this last winter. We don't want to get to next winter and find we're going to go through the same problems. I think we're seeing a new norm in winters. Obviously, they're never consistent, but the overriding kind of average may well be wet rather than freezing. And that impact on our roads is probably more devastating, as we saw this year. I think the devastation that the long wet winter and spring caused to our highways, I think is unparalleled, really. So we've recognised that and we're targeting that. But there's also an ask of landowners in terms of their, their riparian kind of obligations to ensure that there is proper drainage systems maintained. Our highways are not drainage systems. Our highways are highways. Our highways are meant to drain off into land and to gullies and things like that, which are meant to be maintained by landowners, and not every landowner is as meticulous in terms of doing that. So we recognise it, we've put money to do it, and we're on with trying to wrestle with it. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a flick of a switch, chuck some money at it, and it's going to go away. I think this is going to take some time to get to those issues around flooding.
Can I just ask one question on number 24? Yeah, paragraph number 24, where you say that you're putting additional resources into roles to support highways transformation programme. Does that also mean crews on the ground as well as crews in the office and extra inspectors?
It has to include resources across the piece, doesn't it? So whilst it's not kind of, when we haven't got people in cupboards that we can just pull out, but there is investment in capital equipment, for example. There is investment in additionality around gully emptying. And you're right, one of the areas that we want to increase is things like flood inspection, flood support staff. I mean, on my own patch, I know for the sort of Stone area, there's kind of one person with a JCB if we need to do some dig down. So it's stretched, and that's been recognised. So that's something we want to expand. But it won't be a flick of a switch. Obviously, these things need to grow.
I understand that, thank you. It's just sort of concerned with when you mention dig down teams, they tend to be very far and few between.
Yep.
So when you're wishing to have a dig down team, you have to wait.
You do.
So I'm just wondering if you're having extra men on the ground that are actually doing that job.
That is the plan, to have to broaden the flood management, flood prevention and response, mechanical response. So, the one man and a JCB to cover a district is not good enough, and we've recognised that. That's been recognised, and that's going to be improved.
Thank you. Councillor White.
We are demanding good performance from Amy. So Amy received a letter either late last week or early this week saying we are putting this additional investment into the highways. We expect to see high quality repairs that last a decent period of time. We're all aware around this table, and everybody could give us a dozen examples each of where a repair has not worked well. I had a delegation from Councillor Pert's division came to see me last week with a petition about the A519, making their points about the work there, and they were valid points. So we want to make sure that the additional investment that is going to Amy is resulting in high quality work and an increase in the amount of work, because that's why we're putting the money in. That's what people expect to see. That's what we're delivering for them. As our subcontractor, or as our main contractor, we want to see that actually happening on the ground.
Thank you. And thank you for your report. Is there any further questions? No? I think that's it then. If you wish to leave, you're more than welcome to leave, or you're more than welcome to stay. Have we lost Mike, have we?
Mike's over there. He's just over there. He's doing something with his computer.
Oh, right, okay. Are we ready for number... I've lost my thingy now.
6.
Number 6. Bob's just left. We'll just wait for Bob to come back. Oh, okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, we'll wait for... Do you want to wait for Bob to come back in, or... That's okay, thank you, Mike. Yep, okay. We're now on to number 6, Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. Have we all read that report? I take that. John, have you read that report? Yes. That's okay. You normally say something and you've not said anything, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Just on the annual report, we've all had, the chairs have all had an input, and we've all seen it. So I'm happy to second that. We move it.
So we have no further questions on that report. No? Okay. Thank you. On to number medium-term financial strategy working group. I think we've all agreed, didn't we, that we were going to put our chairs onto this committee. Are we still quite happy to do that? No, we're having chairs. Sorry, Mandy, I'm just moving my
Chair, I think people volunteered to do it last time. I know Councillor Oates was on it last time. I'm quite happy to keep it the same if we've got the same members.
Councillor Pert.
I think there was a recommendation from the last MTFS that it would be beneficial to have the chairs or alternatively the vice chairs just to make sure that any cross-cutting issues get picked up and stuff that's already been done necessarily in committee doesn't get refreshed or redone in the working group. I think that was the suggestion. I think it sort of probably is a sensible one because, you know, there are certain ties across some of those areas. But I think if it was chairs and vice chairs, you've got a choice of a wider range of people.
Councillor Francis.
Yeah, I was on the MTFS for 11 years, so it was a big committee to start with when we took over this council in 2009, and that's exactly what we had, chairs and vice chairs. And about 2 years into our administration, it was decided to slash the numbers because it was too big. It was way too big for what the MTFS has got to do, because you've got to get the salient points over and make sure that you're actually bearing down on the problems we've got, i.e. overspends and this, that and the other. So I would be very cautious of increasing the committee in size, to be quite frank, because you could end up having a 4-hour blinking debate, to be quite frank, which we used to have, I might add.
Yeah, the plan is not to increase it. The plan is just to put either chairs or vice chairs on it from each committee, so they have the information when it comes to the MTFS. And we were going to ask Nigel to stay on as well, and Jill has asked to step down from it, and we were going to ask Councillor Hayden to replace Jill. So we were only looking at 6, 7 or 8 people. It wasn't going to expand any larger. We just feel the knowledge that we were getting from the chairs, because they have first hand, or your vice, if it's easier for you, your vice to come, that's... Thanks. But I mean, I'm open to views. It's not a said done deal. Obviously, we've got to vote on this, but I just think it's logical.
With respect, Chair, you can call any member of the committees in to give their points of view, and not have them sitting around a table for a couple of hours. So you can then interview them if their particular subject comes up on the agenda.
I don't know whether I've missed something here, Chair, but since Councillor Graytrick's time, I've always sat on the MTFS committee. Not MTFS. What are we talking about?
MTFS.
MTFS committee. Am I assuming from what I'm hearing here that I won't be on it this time?
Sorry, no. Do you want me to explain? Normally, I think in the past, the membership has been automatically renewed. Back in November, the Chair and Vice Chair's Programme Board agreed that it made sense to have the Chairman of the other scrutiny committees on the MTFS, so that, as Councillor Pert said, there's some continuity if items go back to the main committees. There's also been a number of changes from corporate during the year. So Councillor Wilcox has automatically gone off now as a cabinet member. Councillor Thompson it was on last year. Councillor Hayden, as vice chair, wanted to join the committee. Councillor Heath wanted to come off. So at the moment, if Councillor Spencer, I appreciate Councillor Clements has nominated a vice chair. Councillor Spencer, are you happy to join the working group as the chairman of safeguarding?
I am. I wonder if I just have an opportunity to put it to my vice chairs to see if they would like to do it. I do sometimes think that we leave them out a little. So can I get back to you in a couple of days' time?
Okay, so it will be you or the vice chair. So that would mean it would leave Councillor Peters, if you're still happy to join the group, Councillor Yates, Councillor Pert, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hayden, and Councillor Oates has been a member in the past. I'm not sure about his attendance rate or whether he still wants to join.
He's not here, so leave him on it.
Can I ask the reason why you feel we should leave him on it when he hasn't been attending?
Well, somebody's attendance rate shouldn't make a difference. Councillor Oates comes with a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge from his 20-odd years on Borough Council and the 8 years plus the other 4 years he did before. So to take him off because his attendance isn't what you expect is a bit of a punishment, I feel.
Okay, that's a fair comment. However, his attendance has been, I would say, very, very low. And if he brought that attendance, if he was here to attend and brought that knowledge, that would be fantastic, and we'd keep him. So what we'll do is we'll ask him if he's quite happy to stay on. I think Councillor Yates wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. I'm feeling quite giddy because I'm agreeing with Councillor Francis again. I think the chairs could be brought in for specific meetings to discuss that specific subject. So you've got the focal and not particularly wasting their valuable time, but perhaps there's better uses of their valuable time than sitting in other meetings where you're focused on something which isn't specific to that chair. I think a good compromise, in a way, is what Councillor Spencer said, and actually nominate the vice chairs to be on this committee, but reserve the right to bring the chairs in to actually, with their support officer, to actually be drilled down on those specific points at that specific time. So I don't know if we can put proposal, because I'd propose that is something which I think would work. Vice chairs come on this committee, but we reserve the right to bring chairs in for a specific drill down and a debate on a particular agenda point on that meeting. Because last time a lot of it was pretty much as today, looking at the education and children's services, because that's where things were out of kilter.
The other thing I might add, Chair, is that you've got senior officers in those MTFS meetings which are costing a lot of money. So, you know, you should check the agendas, what's going to be on it and which particular people you need in there, which is what I alluded to earlier on and Nigel said, to be honest.
If it's the committee's wish, I will contact Councillor Oates and Councillor Spencer will speak to his vice chairs and then I'll confirm membership at the next meeting.
And I didn't mean to offend anybody, so Councillor Peters, sorry. I missed your name off. It wasn't intentional because you're still on the list, so I do apologise. We'll now move on to the work programme.
Have you got overview and scrutiny work programmes on twice? On Thursday the 30th and Tuesday the 10th of September.
What page is it?
The meeting on the 9th of September is reserved for any call-in decisions. So we tend to have them as a separate meeting.
Has everybody seen the work programme? Are we all quite happy with it? There's no issues, any concerns? No? Councillor Spencer?
Sorry, just one very quick thing. As mentioned previously, of course, one of the big challenges that we have at the moment is the Ofsted report around children's services and the amount of money that is incurring and likely to incur. And I just wondered whether the plan is flexible enough at some stage to bring update reports around that to this committee.
I think we can look at that and ask that question. I'm overrunning myself. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Oh. Actually, John,